Welcome to the Forest School Podcast, a show where I, Lewis, and my co-host, Wem Southerner, set out to explore a shared pedagogy. It's a space where cerebral thinking matters more than craptivities, where educational purpose outweighs pretty resources, and where inclusion is more than just a buzzword. Join us as we overthink the trivial, deep dive into whatever sparks our dopamine, and reflect on what it means to truly hold space for others, holistically and without judgment. Thanks for being here. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Okay, you were talking in a podcast like a little while ago, we were talking about cross-species adoption, and you were talking about like pets and stuff. With Ruth, We were talking about this. So I've had a really interesting example of like, it's not cross-species adoption, but it is like cross-species reaction, in that some people who've been following the videos and stuff that I've been putting on social media will have seen that there's sparrowhawks nesting in the woods at the moment. It's the second year they've ever been there. It's the first year they've ever had chicks there. So there's like 4 or 5 chicks. They're going through the thing at the moment where the parents, I think, are scaling down how much they're helping them. These babies we've been watching them fly. Like, first they were just shuffling around in the nest, and now they're going to like a couple of trees away, and the radius that they're sort of moving is getting bigger, right? Which is glorious to watch. It's lovely. However, the noise that a baby buzzard make when they're hungry and they want their parent is exactly the same noise as a baby human makes when it needs a parent. Just that like, and it hits something in the reptilian part of my brain that I can't turn it off. And it was really interesting. Like, it really, and I think it's something that I didn't have before I had my own kids, but something about that noise really triggers a like action, must do action.
Yeah.
I
must go response. And find a dead bird right now to feed to them.
It's just very weird. And interestingly, it's been like, I was talking to other like parents when we go for the like young families group and stuff, and being like, this is doing the same thing to you. It's not doing that to everyone, but it is doing it to a lot of people. And my, like, because they're not my kids, I can't help just the trajectory of like, oh, there's buzzards, there's baby sparrowhawks in the woods, how lovely. Oh, okay, they need to shut the fuck up now. Like, they really could do it, because I can't
really
help
putting you
it.
off. And you can't focus either.
And I feel like Chris Packham, you know, he's always I feel like a little bit grumpy about birdsong, because it lands differently with him. Like, people are coming into the woods and being like, oh, lovely, isn't that a beautiful sign of spring and summer, this nesting? And me, who has been there, you know, days on the trot with I'm like, they're going like, yeah, it's brilliant, yeah, the joys of spring.
So
okay,
nice.
fucking shut up. Makes me feel like a grumpy like miser.
This is totally not related to what you are talking about, except it is about nature. I was in Bristol last week, and I walked past a jewellery shop that was all like independent jewellery makers. And there were these amazing, like really realistic metal slugs, like hyper realistic slugs, studded with jewels, and you could buy like a jeweled slug and like a ring, but it was just a slug like curling around your finger. Very, very realistic in kind of brown metal. Oh my god, so magical. I should have got the name of the jeweler.
We have some ceramic slugs in my house that are very brightly coloured, so they're like red and yellow and polka dot and whatever, and they're on all the sort of houseplant pots. There's something cool about, like, I get the vibe that if slugs could, they would kind of bedazzle themselves.
Oh yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know what there is about that. They're just kind of like,
it's just that juxtaposition of like beautiful jewels and eating shit. You know, I would do that.
It's a line I walk daily.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're podcasting today about a book which we have both read, and we're not talking to the author, but maybe one day we will, because I would really like to. The book is called The Joys and Shapes of Autistic Play by Max Alexander.
Look, the people watching the video, they get two double. And
it is a quite small book, and I am imagining that it is self-published, and Max's other name is Play Radical. So you can go to playradical.com, and we got our copies on Etsy,
I think it is self-published because you can download this whole book as a PDF from Max's website, which I'm guessing with licensing and stuff you wouldn't be able to do if it was being published. You're right, it is a short book. What is it, like 100 and something? Oh, not even 100, 70 something pages. Reasonably big font. It's not too dense. It's not too... I think that's why we've both read it super fast and then gone, oh, we need to talk about this because we're going to talk about it between us anyway. We might as well capture it and be like, yes, this is...
We had to stop ourselves having a conversation, didn't we?
Oh, many times.
Stop talking, because we'll record this chat.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I've had to, so what I've been able to do, which is really interesting, is I took this book to the woods and showed it around to some of the other adults there. And it was really nice having, it's such an accessible level of book that people could, quite often there's like stuff to do with playworking and, like forest school ethos and all this kind of majubbins. That's a word I've made up, majubbins. And when you,
I like it.
majubbins. It's me, Detective Majubbins. Here. Anyway, when you want to...
Were you about to say there's lots of books that are just really dense?
They're really dense and you can't access them whilst also sort of being in the woods with people and whatever else. But this book was is so like accessible and kind of like, it's not bite-sized, but it is kind of like pick it up, put it down, pick it up, put it down. And it was really nice watching the book kind of float around the woods with the various adults, picking it up for a bit and then putting it down, and then someone else walking past it and going, I'm looking at it, but right. And then reading it. And then, and also people bringing me this book and being like, this page. And I go, oh, I know. And then, so it's been really nice. I would, it's absolutely going in the like, I should say Lily Horseman recommended this book to me. I think she had just ordered it and said, have you seen this book? And within 5 minutes, my copy was in the post. So what is it, Wen, for people that are just like, stop talking about how good it is and just talk about what it is?
Yeah. So it is a taxonomy of play types in the way that Bob Hughes has done, long ago, the taxonomy of play types. And Max, the author of this one, mentions that and says, it's all very well, but like through his experience as a play worker, an artist and an inclusive play advocate, he has basically been noticing these different types of autistic play. I'm just looking how many there are. How many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The 8 different autistic play types, and he basically says there is good, there's enough reason to put these in a book to make other people aware of them, and then the format of the book is in the each chapter is about a particular play type, and then it says what it might look like and some descriptions of what you might see when observing this type of play, a play diary, so kind of his experiences of it, and then how you can support it in others or nurture it in yourself, which I really liked. So I like that thing of nurturing in yourself, because it might be that you're just like missing out on a really lush thing that you could do. So not only can you read this and go, oh my God, I do that, or that's what somebody's doing when they're doing that thing. You can also go, I don't do that, but why? I should probably try. It's great,
And I think there's lots of these they're play shapes, aren't they? Because they all come with like a visual kind of illustration, which for me is very helpful to map them out with. But I think that what I found really interesting about these was they often start either in a similar place or they would look similar to some of the Bob Hughes play types, and then some of these descriptions are about like, but it's not going to go that way, or like, and I'm reflecting, looking at this book and being like, oh yeah, you're right. That's why sometimes when you're with the best play worker will in the world, trying to facilitate something and going, why is this not slotting in? I can see that they're doing locomotor play and I absolutely get that. But every time I suggest this, it doesn't quite land right.
Or respond in that way, or
it's not quite clicking. And sometimes that's just like, but then often what happens is like play types move on very quickly. So you never really get time to settle on like, hey, do you know there's a pattern there where that doesn't? And I think lots of these play shapes, are very validating in that way of like, hey, this is play, this is how it's going to
100%.
look, this is different.
And Max does say that at the beginning in terms of context and why talk about autistic play, why write about it. And he explains how so often autistic play is invalidated by people either going, well, that doesn't count as play. That is just blah, blah, blah. Or that is just la, la, la. Or they can't do that. They don't play. Or like invisible and unnoticed. And so shining that light and going, look, this is play and it's really flipping important and valid, and you can be part of that if you're invited as well, and here's how it might look like if you are invited and you want to create a connection with that person if they are open to that. And I definitely have seen that happen in settings, people kind of going, oh yeah, no, they just do that, they just do that in the corner. You can't engage with them, they can't develop, you know,
and
all of those
even we're trying to build these kind of play skills, and essentially it's like we're trying to build neurotypical play skills, or we're trying to build like the type of play that we want. Sometimes it's not even neurodivergent, neurotypical, it's like we're trying to develop the types of play that we want to see here, because they do the types of play that they want to here, but that's better in another space, and we don't really want them to do it. This is all unspoken. We don't want them to do it here. We want them to do like, well, here's where we do role playing, and so we're trying to build up their role playing skills, and that kind of majabba. There you go. There's the word again. I was gonna ask you before we dive into some of these, because I think it'd be useful for us to pick through some of these for people. How do you feel? Because one thing I noticed when I was reading these, and I went and had a flick back through some of the Bob Hughes ones, and I was struck by how much of these ones talk about internal worlds and internal experiences, as opposed to a lot, not exclusively, but a lot of the Bob Hughes descriptions talk about the external behaviours of the play. And that we've talked before in the past on the podcast about like inner worlds are people's inner worlds, and you can kind of guess but you don't know, whereas these, because in the way that they validate these play shapes, this book really dives into like, what are people getting out of this play, out of this repetitive thing, or out of this, like, what's the feeling that people have? Like, how did you feel? Do you think that counters, is that like contrary to the inner worlds are inner worlds, or is this like, actually the Bob Hughes stuff would have been better if it had more inner world? How does that sit?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess that firstly, I like this. I like this book because it made me realize that any one of us could make a book like this in terms of the play types or play shapes that we observe, and that we observe that we believe are important and perhaps are overlooked. And I love that. I love that idea that you're like, yeah, there's Bob Hughes, there's over there, like, but that isn't all encompassing, and there are like other little niches or focuses in play shapes or play types that anybody who is a play worker might be able to write about. And so this is Max Alexander's collection of the play shapes that he observes and that perhaps he experiences. And he, as an autistic person, is able to describe his inner world when he is engaging in this play shape. So, and I like that because I liked how it really, and what I also like about it is that he doesn't just talk about children, and he really sets that up at the beginning and says, I'm going to talk about body minds, because this could be any person basically, and I'm going to use that word body mind, which I really liked. And so it includes you in it. It includes, as we said, you know, how can you nurture this play in yourself? And so it makes it okay that it's also about your inner world, as well as young people who you might be play working with. So I thought that was really inclusive and inspiring. And yeah, to like describe, I guess it helps to validate that play shape, doesn't it? Because if you can say, yeah, what it might look like pancake stack role play, for example, one of the play shapes, talks about repetition of a thing happening and then a thing and it happening again and again and again and again. So, and I was really interested in this play shape because I have definitely experienced this in a very similar way to the example that Max describes. So he describes a person giving him some imaginary shampoo cake and him eating it and then giving a exaggerated like, oh, that's disgusting reaction, and the person laughing and then repeating it and doing it again. And he describes how it isn't just repetition, because it is more than repetition. That's why he's describing it like a pancake stack, that the first time you did it still exists in both of your memory, and then you do it again and there'll be subtle differences and subtle changes the next time, and so on and so on and so on. So his reaction of disgust might change over time, might become more and more exaggerated. And I've literally had that same play experience with somebody in the mud kitchen where they've like made me pretend eat some stuff and it's been poisonous, and they go poisonous or whatever, oh, you're gonna die. And it being hilarious, and the more times you do it, the more hilarious it becomes. It's like it's comedy, isn't it? It's just that yeah. And I know what's going to happen, and the like there's a little picture of the person in like gleeful anticipation, like they know what's going to happen next, and it happens, and it's still funny. Why was I talking about this? I can't remember. I can't remember how I started that sentence.
But it is very like apt, isn't it? And it fits very neatly with that thing that I think lots of people have observed anyway in autistic play, which is like that general like repetition thing. But normally it's in terms of like reading the same book again, or watching the same TV episode or TV show again, and actually taking that out and putting it into like a role play scenario makes complete sense. But it really, for me, challenged because again, I've been in those scenarios like you where it's like, yeah, this is poisonous, or I'm going to jump out at you is often one that I repeat with people. Is like, you go over there, you walk over here, we're going to jump out at you, we're going to, do whatever. And it made me sort of challenge my own thing of like, well, my instinct sometimes in that scenario is to move the story along, to like vary it and to go like, here's the thing. And that is true, not true, that is appropriate in a Bob Hughes world of like socio-dramatic, we're acting things out. What if we introduce new things? And again, it's that like best will in the world. Maybe we're, and then, but actually it's another example where it's like, oh, who's leading that? Am I as observant as I could have been in picking up those cues of when people are like, no, the same thing again, please.
Absolutely. And I think, yes, totally. That's what I was going to say. Where I was starting is that we might have that instinct of like, oh, it's just repetition, or they're stuck. They seem to be a bit stuck. They're just sort of in a bit of a loop there. And maybe that's because they don't feel safe, or maybe that's because they can't imagine how it should go, or you're kind of looking for the negative there in like, how can you help them overcome this? That sounds quite pejorative. But actually what this book is to highlight that moment is important. That isn't just Bob Hughes' sociodramatic play. It is pancake stacking. So we're doing some pancake stacking right now, and that's okay. We're just doing pancake stacking. Like, it validates it as a thing on its own, and then suggests things like, don't rush to introduce new ideas, stick with the script. After a while, you might start to notice subtle changes, and when you've built your trust with your play partner, you might even be invited to improvise or add your own spins and twists. And about like that feeling, that inner world, I guess, of anticipation of something that you know about, as opposed to anticipation of something completely new and what's going to happen, what's
predictable anticipation.
Yeah, and that's just joyful, and like that is enough. For something to be joyful means that it is valid. Like, that is a way to spend time that is completely appropriate and enough because it's joyful.
Yeah, and that's really what struck me with thinking about that thing of like sitting in a joyful moment of anticipation is very different to the one that I think back to is one of the Dan Siegel books, I think. And they talk about finishing the narrative, and they talk about that story of the person that had a traumatic incident, and and their childminder had to go away in an ambulance or something, and they just kept repeating that bit of the story. And so this person is going, oh, they're stuck in the story, they're stuck there, and let's help them finish the narrative. What happened after Sarah went in the ambulance, and then what happened after, getting to that, like, and then the doctors looked after her, and like that's definitely sat with me as a technique, as like helping people finish the narrative. And I guess one way of looking at this like pancake stacking thing is like, it's done, and it's okay that it's done, and just sits in a cycle. And validating that, and not seeing that as a, oh God, need to move that on, need to do that thing. It's really like, oh, of course, that makes, total sense. How did you feel about... Oh, go on.
I wanted to ask you whether one or more of these really resonated with you in terms of like, oh, now there's a name for that, or now there's a pigeonhole for that, and I've observed this behaviour, or I've engaged in this behaviour, or this feeling, and now was there one particularly that like stood out for you as like, ah?
I think there was a few where actually they were sort of, I'd had disparate thoughts or disparate observations of something, and it really helped to sort of, it's almost like going, do you know they've all got blue in them? And you go, yes, of course. The link is that they've all got blue in. So obviously I spent to a few people about this idea of concept jamming as one, where you're jumping around topics that may seem disparate. I can't imagine anybody enjoying conversations where you jump around topics that don't seem linked, but they are really linked, and you just throw different stuff
and
around.
You're really serious and intellectual for quite some time of it, and then suddenly you switch to being completely stupid and silly and absurd and laughing. Like, who would do that?
I can't imagine. Who? I know.
Can you imagine? So weird. Majubbins. Majabba.
So I think I had a really interesting... I don't want to talk about all of these. I have to avoid like just going on that one and that one and that one. I had a really interesting thing today, this week, where somebody sent me a message. So, because I've been growing the social media account recently with a few more like longer videos, and some people have been getting in touch recently where they're sending messages, and it's like in that way of like, hey, my kid's been doing this, and I wondered what you might advise with your lens on, or like, I'd love to know what you think about this. And people I absolutely do not know around the world. It's really interesting. And someone sent me a message about I'm going to anonymize this as much as I can. It was like their kid does loads of rough and tumble play, particularly with people they don't know, particularly in like public spaces. The other kids always seem like fairly happy with it, but I wonder if it's something I should be watching out for, or something that, how can I sort of... It was almost like it was that person's needs, because it was like, other parents are looking at me, and my kid is always the one that does this thing. And I happened to be, at the time that the message came in, reading the chapter about relational mapping. And so this relational mapping thing is like, where is my arm connected to your shoulder? What happens if I pull on your hand? What happens if I touch your head? And like, mapping your body to other people's bodies. And it was just like, it's kind of like, oh, maybe it's not that at all. But listen, I've literally just come across this concept that is like separate to rough and tumble play. And it could just be this thing, like that's how they connect with people. And, and obviously I talked a bit more about like play cues. Maybe they have a limited range of play cues. Maybe they have, hyposensitivity to touch and all these different things. But the idea, like having that thing about relational mapping, is something that I've observed in lots of children, and particularly what I was thinking about it was, I think we've both been in that situation where it's not necessarily the one that they describe in the book of like touching and, touching your knee and touching your shoulder and touching your, what happens if my foot goes on your leg? But it was the children we've had who do what I call like the slow lean. Like they come and stand next to you, and then their shoulders touching your shoulder, and then maybe an elbow goes onto your lap, and then maybe the elbow moves down a little. I'm moving down in the camera. Maybe the elbow moves down a little bit, until you realise that this person has sort of melted over you in a way that, and cats do it as well, where you're like, oh, this is fine. I'm taking a bit of weight. I'm taking a little bit of your weight. I'm actually propping you up quite a lot now in a way that's not comfortable. And having it sounds silly to be like, been doing this for 10 years and it's still interesting to find ways of being like, you could validate that a bit more. But again, it's just something about being like, I see that now. I see because it's got the inner world stuff underneath it about like, this is what people are getting from it. It's another thing where I was like, I could validate that more. I could, because it's a situation that compared to other ones, that to me presses on your own needs a little bit more than, if someone wants to pancake stack, you can move away from it. If someone wants to concept jam and go, hey, let's talk about this thing, you can stop the conversation. But the sort of slow, melty kind of like also sits on my needs of like, I don't really love being touched.
Yeah. Totally. That is in the same way that parent contacted you with a concern, when it comes to play with other people's bodies and lessons that we might want kids to learn about consent and personal space and all those kind of things. There's a lot of kind of overlapping ideas there about validating play needs and providing that at the same time as making sure that everyone feels safe and consensual. So that is really interesting, that one, definitely. And I'm trying to think, I'm also thinking about moments, because often, like in that play cue example that we always talk about the person kind of throwing pine cones or like, and you can look at it at one way, like someone wanging a pine cone at you as they run past, and you can either view that with, oi, why do they always do that? Or, oh, it's a play cue, they want to be chased. Yes. In the same way, I think this kind of play type or play shape can present in that same way, that you can sometimes have people kind of, playing with your body. That sounds dodgy, but you know what I mean. What I mean? They are relational mapping with you or want to do that. And we can quite easily take that as like, that's just a bit negative, and if we're actually okay with engaging a bit of relational mapping, we can have a name for it now and actually recognize it and go, okay, this is a type of play. It's not that you want something else. You're not cueing me, or you're not frustrated. Do you know what I mean? Like, we might see that as a behavioral signal that something else is going on. Yeah. Oh, you're kicking my shin because you are frustrated or upset about it. And it might be that, but it may also be this type of this play shape in its own right, which is really interesting.
Yeah. And it makes me think how that often leads into like, you can still do relational mapping, but assert your own needs. If sometimes that's often play that I will turn into like a bit of rough and tumble play, pushing back on like shoulders and going like, whoa, and tight hugs and things that kind of move into like, this is still relational mapping, but I've got some agency in this play. I was thinking it's interesting. Some of these are, I think some of the times that people feel challenged about these different types of play is when it's very overt that another person is a play resource. And that relational mapping really highlights that thing of like, you just want to touch somebody else's body and compare it to yours and do that thing. And it's not actually hugely different in concept to like coming home from a long day and talking to your partner and being like, I want to use your brain to process my day. So your brain is the processing unit, 'cause it doesn't have the same emotions and hormones that mine does in it right now. But that's less overt because people don't see it that way. They're like, oh, that's lovely, that's communication, that's
some
bonding.
People do.
Okay.
My partner, for example, I've been using him in exactly that way because I've been having some serious whack dreams recently, and I wake up and I need to process those dreams. One of his absolute hates in life is people telling you their dreams. He's I
hate people telling me their dreams.
He's like, really, there's nothing more boring.
It didn't happen. What is the point?
Crap.
It's absolutely irrelevant.
No, but when you're the one who's had it and you're like, oh my God, my brain made that. How and what does it mean? And, I just need him to listen to help me process it. And he's like, oh my God, you can see him like grinding his teeth. I'm like, thank you for your brain listening to my brain.
The only time, here's the caveat, the only time telling someone about their dream, I'll die on this hill, by the way, the only time that it is acceptable to tell someone about a dream that you've had is if you are telling them because it has affected your emotional state right there in that moment. If you're waking up and you're like, I am incredibly stressed because, but you just need to go, I had a really stressful dream and my body's still full of the stress stuff. You don't need to
Yeah.
go into like who was giving you the maths exam or like what kind of like vaccines you needed to invent in the timeline, right? None of that needs to happen.
But can I ask you, do you have really vivid dreams or not?
Don't really remember dreaming almost ever.
I sort of feel Ed's the same. So I kind of feel like maybe if one is a vivid dreamer, then it is slightly less boring because you understand that, like, I know it's mental, isn't it? Oh my God, that's mental. That is mental. I just going back to that relational mapping thing, that book that we read and podcasted about ages ago called Something and Cobras, Coils and Cobras.
Cow's Tails and Cobras 2.
Yes.
I
was just thinking about some of the little things that we got from that book and how that might support relational mapping. So do you remember those like little physical challenges where it's like grab a partner and see if you can both put your soles of your feet together and then balance in that way?
Yes.
Or do you remember those? And
yes.
Even if engaging in that kind of challenge wouldn't count as relational mapping, what it does do is set a kind of environment in which that kind of interaction between bodies is okay, and is a possible play avenue. And I often think about that, and I think about sort of primary aged schooling and what kind of messaging people get about other people's bodies in those situations. So some primary schools I know do like peer massage, for example, where you sit in a circle and like massage the person in front of you. And some schools would never do that in a million years. And what kind of messaging is given about
those schools are absolutely not going to play Smell Your Friends.
Which you should play, by the way.
You should play Smell Your Friends. Chloe smells friends. Someone puts a blindfold on, and then you get another person to come stand in front of them from the group, and you'd be amazed how quickly you can get members of a group. It needs some guidance around like, don't say anything like rude. Let's just talk about like guess who it is or whatever. But like
the neck is a sweet spot for the smell, I think.
Yeah, it's a good game. It's a good game.
It is a good game.
On the subject of like consent and bodies and different things, I need to talk to you about voice as a sensory toy.
Oh yeah.
Because I do not consent.
Because no.
Because I can't turn off my ears, and there are lots of people in my life in different places who love using their voice as a sensory toy.
Oh yeah.
I've known about voice as a sensory toy for a while. You know,
that's that own thing of like play work is if somebody is standing at the top of a hill and shouting really loudly, play work is like, do you want a megaphone? Do you want this traffic cone to make your voice real loud? Like, I remember that, reading that definition and going, cool. But yes, you're holding space for a group and one person really wants to use their voice as a sensory toy and some other people just want to eat lunch. They just want to eat lunch without having severe nervous dysregulation.
But here's the big but, because I've been very flippant there. That's big but. Here's the big but. The big but in this is that this is a really good framework for anybody who's not necessarily in a non-judgmental headspace just yet to reframe noise making as an internal self-stimulating process, and not a like you're trying to disrupt the class. They just want attention. They can't stand it when people aren't looking at them. Like, this is a chapter, the voice as a sensory toy, that I would offer back to people to be like, if they weren't quite in that space yet of like, they're doing this for themselves. They're not doing it to annoy you, to get at people, to do whatever else. Like, in the same way that, like, again, there's all these socially acceptable things, like people who are like sing, you know, and in that way of like, I've realized time and space appropriate. If someone's belting out like Michael Jackson in a maths exam, that's not appropriate. But
Oi! Oi! Oh my God. I can't believe I remember that.
But in general, someone would we've been doing this for 7 years. There are no stories left between us.
Only seven. God. Sorry, carry on. Yeah.
If someone was moving around, say like the playground, let's say, and they're going like singing like Wicked, right, to themselves, the outward response to that is going to be, majority is going to be people being like, oh, how lovely. Oh, that's so, that's so joyful to hear them doing the thing. A kid walking around going like, honk, honk, honk. They're doing the same thing, but they're not going to get the same response from society. But they are experiencing the same thing, which is that, like, when I make noises, body feel good. And so that's like, this chapter really sums that up well in a way that I would offer to people,
Yeah, definitely. And I was just thinking about what we were talking about previously, and I remember that thing, if you're like early on in the non-judgmental game, you might read and accept behaviour is communication. Behaviour is communication.
All behaviour is communication.
All behaviour, yeah. And then you go a little bit further down that road and you're like, no, it isn't.
What does honk communicate? What does honk mean?
Maybe, and it's basically what you just said. It's like someone go around the playground shouting honk. Maybe they don't want attention. Maybe they aren't trying to disrupt other people's games. Maybe they are not dysregulated. Maybe they just flipping love shouting honk in the playground right now because they're using their voice as a sensory toy. And I learned a new word in this chapter, which was palilalia. Do you see that? So echolalia, palilalia. And so I had to look that up. If anyone else doesn't know what that means, it is repetition of your own voice, especially like the last word or sound spoken. So just repeating that last bit.
Which
scripting
we've had
and
with
verbal
people,
stimming.
haven't we? That palilalia thing, we both clocked it with some people. This is years ago now, but there were some people who would say the last thing again, and until they were ready to do the next bit. And I always took it as like holding the conversation. Like I'd interpreted that as they want to carry on, but the sort of processing hasn't quite caught up yet. But they know that if they stop making noise, the conversation will move on, or people will think, which maybe it is. Sometimes that's part of it, but also just like enjoying that last sound. Is a thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And there's some stuff there about like, the categorization of non-verbal or non-speaking people, which is really interesting. And I would definitely recommend people get hold of the book, and rather than trying to read it all out, just get the book and read about that because it's important. Doing voices counts.
Doing voices.
Oh, I love a little bit of doing voices. Love it. Absolutely love it. Yeah.
And also, so I've realized that it's now a double-edged thing. Again, I'm on a quest to find parts of my personality that aren't diagnostic tools. We're still working on it. They all are. So one thing that I realized that we've talked about before that you do that thing, one does a thing where if someone asks you something and it's a little bit awkward, you don't quite want to say like no flat out. Kids says like, why are we doing this? And I will respond like maybe in a silly voice and be like, because me old legs are tired. Whoa. Right. And I've realized that
singing is the other way to answer, or to put a thing that is tricky into words. Yeah.
So I've realised that is serving two functions. One is that it is softening the receipt of that no, or the receipt of that like denial. But also, I am suddenly in a moment of stress because someone's asked me a question that I realise is difficult, and I'm going to have to give a stress. And so it's self-regulating to do a voice or to sing a song, to be like, oh, you've asked me something awkward, and I need to get back into my body a little bit to be like, no, because we cannot go to the master. Like, they are. It's self-regulating. It's self-play in a way of like, that's something I think is really interesting to see, and that's what I mean about like lots of this book is like not completely new. Like, oh my god, I've never even noticed that I sing songs and do silly voices, but to give sort of point out another color in it and be like, are you playing? Is this the playing you're doing? And be like, yes, of course. Fuck.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about object harmonizing?
Of course. I don't think we could do an episode without talking about object harmonizing. How long shall I give you to monologue about object harmonizing.
20 hours.
Okay, definition first. What is object harmonizing?
It is interaction with objects that carries an emotional quality of care and attention. Basically communing with objects that are not in normal, in inverted commas, ways, animate. So inanimate objects basically being imbued with, like, you could say soul or personality or a quality that just makes them really cool to be around. Like
Life
rocks.
and agency.
Yeah, man. Sticks, trees, like, yeah. Having friends that are not humans or animals, like, you know. And in the bit where Max Alexander says, how can you support it in others? It says, respect individuals' relationship with objects and avoid trying to encourage individuals to play with things properly. And I love that because you can't know the relationship that person has with that thing. You can't know. You can't, and so it's such a violent thing to suggest that somebody might not be using a toy in a correct way, or
which is what a lot of pedagogies have, right? Like Montessori has a lot of that, like these are the lining up sticks and these are the, and Steiner Waldorf stuff has the, like, these are the silks that we use for PE and they must only be used for this dance. And a lot of pedagogies have that kind of thing. So it's interesting to acknowledge those kind of, like, I think I'm right in saying this is a bit where they talk about it as a type of socializing, that it's socializing but with objects in the way that you might sit around with a group of friends, and just by being with those friends you might feel contented and be like, oh, this is lovely, we're all in a space together that just is sitting in. And then particularly that kind of, like, it may not be ordered or particularly, like, neat looking, but, like, just to be sitting with all of the things that you are communing with is a type of seeing it as a type of socializing is very woo-woo, and also I'm fully on board with it.
Yeah, seeing those objects as companions that you can spend time with. Yeah, absolutely love that. Love it.
And it made me think about the, because we've recently done that episode with Danny and talking about that connecting with the more than human and the relationships that we have. Are we, that whole thing, I won't go over the whole episode, but, like, are we part of nature? Are we in nature? Are we using nature? And this is almost the other side of that, where it's saying, like, the tree, in that same way, we're like, what's a play tool? The trees are being used as a play tool. But in that same way that you might be like, sitting on a person is fun, sitting on trees is fun. Those things are both alive. Those things both have needs.
Yeah, and it's very specific, very appropriate to forest school, that this play shape, isn't it? Max references Robin Wall Kimmerer in this chapter, and talking about societies as well. So English, I think we touched on this with the previous episode with Dr. Joe Hume as well, about, like, the humanist lens, and actually in the English language we don't have ways really to express much about objects having.
We objectify things very quickly into, like, that, and that's not alive, it's not a person, therefore it is a thing.
Yes, I realized in English you're either human or a thing. It's like, you don't have animacy.
I realized I'd called someone out the other day because I was talking, and I was it was one of those rare scenarios where the context wasn't completely clear, and I realized I'd completely thrown someone. We were down at the edge of the woodland, and there's a kind of hedge bank, but then it's not a very thick hedge bank, it's like scrubby, and I was pointing out a muzet, one of those holes where an animal has come through and has made this kind of archway over and over and over again. But what I said was, oh, look, somebody's coming in through there. And this person that I was with a few kids and an adult, and the other adult went, well, do we need to stop? How are they getting in? Do you know who it is? And I was like, oh, no, not somebody, like a badger or a fox, and just in that moment, the context wasn't completely clear, but I realized that my language had shifted. And, I wasn't thinking of, like, I will call them a somebody because I believe in it. I was just like, that's somebody's coming through there, in the same way that I might be like, well, somebody's going to grow in this patch of light here because we've cut this canopy. Somebody's going to grow here. And that little shift in my own language is like, it's very, it's an interesting thing, isn't it?
I have wondered about this play shape because this was very important in my childhood, and I still have memories of objects, not necessarily toys, but like objects, like for example a bit of smashed up brake light, like that if you looked through and it was like ruby that I found in the road. Like that was a very important thing for me, and I had a very strong relationship with it, and I kept it in a special tin, and I still remember that, and I was probably like 4 or something when I had that relationship with that object. And I do wonder how people feel now that there are more objects, or have there always been loads of objects? I guess what I'm trying to say is, if I think about my own kids and I wonder about their inner worlds, or kids that we know, and we try and imagine their inner worlds about this play shape.
I understand the question. I understand the question. I would counter it with a story from my own life, which is that I used to, again, one day there'll be a bit of personality that's not in this. I used to
First time you told me this. Anyway, carry on. Yeah.
That's merch. If we ever get round to making merch, This might have to make it a bit more jazzy. So I used to sit for very long periods of time with one of my grandparents in my front garden, which my parents had gravel, and I mean like 5 meters by 5 meters square of gravel with a few plants in it. And we would sit and look for the ones with faces. Now, if you want to say that there were less things there, I'm going to offer back gravel pile as like, no, there fucking weren't there. Because
that's kind of what I wondered, because like broken brake lights as well, like there's always going to be a lot of just crap.
But perhaps those things have different. Those things have different. I was thinking that perhaps the relationship that you have with them is different, because if you, I know I don't know this is again inner worldy type stuff, but if you have a relationship with I'm going to use these air quotes, natural item, right, like a rock or like a stick, that your imagination is engaged if you are communing with that thing, because you're imagining, where did it come from, what will it turn into, what was the situation, what was it life like before, where did it, all of these things, and that's from your imagination almost exclusively. And maybe your experience of the world or whatever. However, if you are communing with, and this is equally valid, if you are communing with, let's say, lots of small plastic figurines that you got from like mystery boxes, and they all come from Pixar films, your relationship to each one is like, I remember when Woody got lost and he had to get on the back of the moving truck, and oh look, here's the ant from Bug's Life, and they are really like pro-communism, and like all these things that you're still having an object relationship with it, you're still communing with it. But do you know do you hear the difference that I'm trying to make, which is that like, where's the story coming from maybe, or which parts of your brain are being engaged by that communing? That's possibly different.
I think I think also, though, that thing you're describing about like having a story or like is part of your interest in that object, I think there's definitely a thing where that doesn't necessarily exist. Like it's a relationship that you can't put into words, and maybe it is part of like the reptilian brain. Maybe it is part of that like collecting items, because to explore and engage with an object is just interesting in itself.
Okay.
Around this stick.
Wow.
And I don't know why. It's not like, oh, I found this on the day where I was la 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 with my family. Like, I can't even remember what beach I picked it up on. I just love that freaking stick so much.
Maybe you want to...
And I'm inspired by the stick. I want to have the stick's babies. No, I don't. That's too far. But I love it. And it's not like I'm even, like, I haven't given it a name. I'm not imbuing it with, like, human qualities or anything.
No. I think that's the mistake that you could read from this object harmonizing and feel like, oh, it's humanizing like typically inanimate objects. And that's not what this is saying. It's like the rock is the rock, and it's a rock because it's a rock. Not because it's like, it's my rock dog. It's not the imaginative play, the prop kind of play from Bob Hughes stuff. It's the thing is what the thing is, and you are like,
and it's special
and all of these things. Okay, I don't want us to just be that we go through but all of these, but I am desperate to talk about okay, fractal investigation I really want to talk about, but that can be like whistle stop, because fractal investigation is just like you get into the minutiae of something and then you realize that it can be broken down into even more minutiae, and then you realize it can be broken down even more, and there's a lovely diagram of this fractal recurring shape as you get down. I was like, oh, that is a thing that you could make a 7-year-long podcast about, where you're like, oh, I've got this pedagogy, and then you dig into it a little bit and you go, no, that's not what it is, and then you dig into it a little bit more and you go, no, that's not what it is. So I love that. When you read different chapter, when you read the thing about nesting, did your brain immediately go to hammocks?
No,
Ooh,
my
okay.
brain immediately went to nests, because I am a person that likes to make nests. But yes, I can see. I mean, that again is so forest school relevant, isn't it? So nesting, the creation of microenvironments like dens and nests within a larger space. This space then acts as a place to listen, think, feel, and observe from. So yeah, there's loads of chat about dens.
Which is the stuff we've talked about palettes before, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like having those lines of sight or hearing that you are in your own world, but within a greater world. You can still hear things and you feel safe because you can still see and hear out, but you also feel cocooned. Yeah. Magic.
And that, I think, nesting is a really interesting one to consider, the layout of your space. I've been through some of the work that we've done, like with level 3 trainees and stuff. You go and visit all these different sites, and some people just, the site is the site you've got, you know what I mean? You're using whatever site is available to you. But some sites, when you're in that, like, because people are like, it has to be a forest circle, so there must be a circle and it must be around a fire pit, and some just give you a slight, like, fucking exposed out here, isn't it? You know, like when the mentality before you use it might be that, like, putting the circle in the middle of a hub means that, oh, that's the best place because, you know, north is the mud kitchen and south is the hammocks and east is, and then, but actually what that means is when you're sat in the middle, which is the place where you want people to be, like, potentially if you're doing like reflections or you're doing questions or what, you're asking people to be quite vulnerable, putting them in the most exposing place kind of predatorially, is quite an interesting juxtaposition, and to reframe that and go, like, and also thinking about that thing of like, well, can people, you know, as we've had before, can people take part in the circle at the start from a hammock? Can people, is it, you know, can people like take part from different parts of the site, and like that's the way that they're playing and the way they need to do that thing. And I think there's an interesting bit there about like the, again, we were talking to a few people about language and about how the choices of words changes things, and the fact that nesting is a verb to me is very interesting. It's not nests. It's not fixed.
It's not dens.
It's not
dens and shelters.
It's not dens and shelters, and that's important because I think there's something in here in this play type which is not using a den. If I'm going to be real controversial, like using a prefabbed, like, wooden shelter that's been ordered and sanded within an inch of its life, and they go like, yes, we have dens at our forest school. That's not it. It's the creation and preening and kind of like, it's a verb. Nesting is a verb, and I think the verbness of it can't be understated, because that will be missed, I think, by some people who will be like, oh, I've set this place up, or like, this is our quiet corner where people go, and if they're in the quiet corner, that sort of thing, and they're like, yeah, but if you can't verb in there, if you can't change it and move stuff around, that's not serving the same purpose. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I enjoyed the way this chapter actually addressed a potential kind of clash here, maybe between autistic and allistic people, or maybe just, you know, any kind of context about, yes, you know, that being like a play shape and a need and a verb, as you say, and then other play that looks similar but actually has a different aim or a different expected outcome from the people involved. So this chapter describing how some people might make a den with the intention that this den is then part of a game in which we socialize in this den, and then we run away, and then we go and like go into somebody else's den and take that thing, or amend it or build it or talk about it. And then other people might be nesting because they want to do nesting. They want to build the nest, and they want to be in the nest, and they want to do nesting.
That is super important. I wanted to, before we finish on this book, I wanted to, the conclusion is very short in here, and there's a very helpful glossary towards the back, but I wanted to really highlight. So it's on page 74. If you want to turn to page 70, do you have those books when you're little that had the little ring? This means turn the page. When you hear this noise, ring, I have turned the page. No. Okay.
Abridged classic tales like Peter Pan
sure.
or whatever, and it was in episodes, so you had to get the next cassette. And then the magazine had the stories printed out with amazing illustrations, so you could read along with the tape if you wanted to, and so it would make that noise when it was time to turn the page. Yeah.
Wicked.
Anyway, sorry.
Sorry, what I was going to say, well, this is kind of relevant, is they've got a Venn diagram at the back, one circle that says sincerity and one circle that says silliness, and just puts play right in the middle. And that is such a good summation of what play is, where you need to be in order to play. You know, I would agree that I don't think I'm playing if I'm just being silly. That's different to if there's an ounce of sincerity in the kind of like, no, but I mean this, like I am actually, a little bit of me is trying to get into this treehouse castle that I'm pretending to attack, or like, no, a bit of me is actually sincere about wanting coffee from the mud kitchen, and and just acknowledging that those things need to have balance and need to sit in the middle, I think is super important. And yeah, I know we've said this word, probably the word of the episode is going to be validating. My question for you, I think I'm putting this straight in to a level 3 in terms of when do you read this this is early days. I think it's such a nice thing to be like, here's the Bob Hughes stuff, but yes, that is getting on a little bit now. Here's some more modern stuff that is equally like palatable, and you might see, stuff coming up. So I think this is like, early in your journey, and actually would be a really nice prompt, not just for early in your like play working explorations, but a really nice early piece of work in a non-judgmental journey. If you're going towards that, like I want to get towards non-judgmental stuff, which we're all on constantly, the sooner you could get this book in front of you, the better, really.
And another fantastic addition to bodies of work from actually autistic people, in order to further knowledge and understanding about neurodivergence in a modern, non-pathologizing, actually from the community way, which is so valuable. And so everybody, please buy it right now.
Or if you can't buy it, go on Max's website and you can find the whole thing as a PDF. I think it's currently out of print. I think you and I might have snaffled up the last few copies, but I'm sure, as we'll make sure to try and tag Max in this. He's quite a difficult person to find on social media. So we'll try and tag them in all the places that I put this, and put all the links in the show notes so that you can go and send emails and messages to Max and be like, you were on this podcast talking about all your work. It's real good. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next time. Bye.